Alright, this is my genogram presentation. First we have the legends and the keys for the genogram symbols that I used. There are two separate ones here, which are emotional genogram symbols and medical genogram symbols. I have used these throughout my genogram, so it will be helpful to look at. To begin, the program that I used to generate my genograms would not allow me to conjoin both of my mother and father's sides together, so because of this I will be explaining each of their genograms separately. But if I were to put the two together, they would simply be connected by my father and mother's relationship history. So we have my mother's side here. You can see that it begins with my nanny and papaw. My nanny does have some active depression and my papaw is in recovery for substance and alcohol abuse. We can see that they were married and they legally divorced, but they still have a friendship. My nanny and papaw had 5 children, which are Sarah, Janie, Whitty, Channing, and my mother. To begin, Sarah was the oldest. She is now deceased, but she did have a history of substance and alcohol abuse along with depression. Both of the fathers of her 2 children also still suffer from drug and alcohol abuse. We can see that John, Tom, and Sarah had a son named Cole who has some struggles with depression. And there's Rodney. They had an abusive relationship but had a son named Parker together. Next is Janie. Janie struggles with substance and alcohol abuse as well as depression and a psychological illness. Janie was separated from a man named Robbie, but they are still friends, and Robbie does struggle with substance and alcohol abuse as well. Janie and Robbie had 2 children together, Raven being the oldest and Trey being the youngest. Raven was adopted by a couple named John and Felicia who have a harmonic relationship. Raven was in a relationship named Ryan. They are now separated and have a distant and hostile relationship, but have 2 children, Arena and Braxton. Trey has been in a relationship with 2 women and had children with both, the first one being Janie. They had Carter together and are now separated, and there is a little bit of jealousy in the relationship due to Sarah, who Trey is harmonically married to and has a son named Storm with. Next is Whitty. She is in recovery from substance and alcohol abuse but still struggles with some depression. She has been in a relationship with 2 men named Justin. One who she is separated from and has a hostile relationship with is still using substances and alcohol, but they have a son named Ryder. The other one being Justin. They have had 2 miscarriages but have a daughter named Emerson and a harmonic marriage. Next is Channing. He does live a gay lifestyle and has some issues with depression. And lastly is my mother, who was married to my father, but they were legally separated. And they do still have a friendship and had 2 children, which are myself and my brother. Next is my father's side. We can see that my dad's biological father had a hostile relationship with my grandmother, and my father's stepdad, which is Leroy, are also separated and they had a history of abuse in their relationship. Leroy also had a history of substance abuse and alcohol abuse as well as a psychological disorder. Leroy and my grandma both had 2 children together, Reba and Jason, who are my father's half-siblings. Reba and Jason do still actively struggle with substance and alcohol abuse as well. We can see that my father has 3 full siblings, which are Susan, Marie, and Alfred Jr. Susan is now deceased, as well as the father of her children, Tim. Susan had struggles with substance and alcohol abuse as well as psychological illness and depression. Tim and Susan were separated and had a hostile relationship, but did still have twins, Josh and Jacob. Jacob has no history of any prior relationships or children, but does have a suspected psychological disorder, while Josh is in a harmonic marriage with Katie, and they have a son named Noah. Next is Marie. She has no history of anything medical or relationship-wise or children. And then we have Alfred Jr., who has a poor, distant relationship with Connie, but they do have 2 children, Elizabeth and Crystal. And then there is my father, who once again was legally divorced from my mother, but they are still friends and had myself and my brother Devin. So as we can see, there are some common trends and tendencies in my family, a couple of patterns. A few of these are substance and alcohol abuse as well as depression, and there is also a kind of even balanced amount between hostile relationships and harmonic relationships within my family.